Hey guys, and welcome to another episode of All Around Hockey, the YouTube channel for the All Around Hockey fan. So today we continue on with our series looking at all 32 NHL teams. We're on our team number 15 team in the National Hockey League, and our fourth now, original six teams. We did the Bruins, we've done the Red Wings, we've done the Blackhawks, and now we're doing the Montreal Canadiens. So have the Rangers and Maple Leafs to go for the original six, but today, we do focus on the Montreal Canadiens, one of the better young teams in the National Hockey League, one of the teams with probably the most exciting future, and the team that is probably in that mode to start making that next run and start making some cup runs here. Uh, to hopefully see if they can add on to that 24 Stanley Cup total that they have. Maybe the closest Canadian team to winning a Stanley Cup currently right now, too, all things considered. But let's look at the lineups that they have. Of course, we all use our good friend Puckpedia here to look over all these lineups and see what they have. Obviously, we started off with Cole Caulfield, one of the top goal scorers in the National Hockey League, and Nick Suzuki there, captain, Yaroslav Koski, Alex Newhook, um, Jacob Evans, and Ivan Demidov there on the second line. Again, a really solid second unit there. Alexander Texier. They brought Philip Deneau back, and Josh Anderson, Kirby Doc, Oliver Kapanen, and Zachary Bolduc, who is still currently a restricted free agent. We'll go over him a little bit later, as there's some rumors of him possibly being on the move or not on the move. We go down here, look at defense. They got Michael Matheson and Noah Dobson, who they brought in last year from the Islanders. They got Struble and Hudson there, and then Gooley and Alexander Carrier, and then Bedard, Arbor Xhekaj, Sam Montalbo, Jakob Dobish, who was the real big helper for them and helped them make a deep playoff run this year, and Jacob Fowler's another one of the top young goaltending prospects in the National Hockey League coming into this season. So you kind of see a little bit of a duo probably between Dobish and Fowler. See what happens with Montalbo. He's on the last year of his contract, so maybe they keep with him, and so they can have a three-headed monster goaltenders. Let's go over here, over to Hockey Reference. We're going to go check out what we have here today for what they did last season. As you can see, their record was 48, 24, and 10, 106 points, finished third in the Atlantic Division. Division that's going to be probably one of the toughest in the National Hockey League this year, with Tampa, Florida, probably having a bounce back year. Boston's still pretty solid. Toronto made some decent moves, and you got to look at those teams as the hard teams to beat this year. Ottawa is still there in that division. So it's lots, and then Buffalo won it last year. So, you got to look at those teams and think they're still going to have good years this year. But Montreal is definitely probably a team poised to maybe take a run at winning that division this year. Goals for, they had 279 goals for, seventh in the league, and goals against 251, halfway point in the league there at 16. And then they made it all the way to the conference finals, where they lost in 5 games to the Carolina Hurricanes. They had an excellent 7-game series with Tampa Bay and an excellent 7-game series with Buffalo before going and losing in 5 to the Carolina Hurricanes, who didn't play much hockey yet to that point. And Montreal pretty much played every single hockey game there is to be at that point when they played them. So maybe their legs got a little tired for them there in the conference finals. But it was a pretty deep run that they made, and Jakob Dobish was one of the big reasons for that. We look at the numbers they had last season. Nick Suzuki, the captain, leads the way with 101 points, 29 goals, 72 assists. Really solidified himself as a bona fide number one center in the National Hockey League. Cole Caulfield, another 51 goal season for him, 37 assists, 88 points. Lane Hudson had a huge year, 12 goals, 66 assists for 78 points. Really starting to take over that number one defensive role. Yaroslav Koski, he's really started to hit his stride now in the National Hockey League after it took him a little bit there. 30 goals, 43 assists, 73 points. Ivan Demidov, somebody who I like. A lot of people are going to be expecting big things out of him this year. He had 19 goals, 43 assists for 62 points. Noah Dobson had a good year in his first year with Montreal, 47 points, 12 goals, 35 assists. Michael Matheson, 37 points there on the back end. Oliver Kapanen had a 22-goal season, which is pretty nice production from probably a little bottom six center, maybe a third line center for you. Zachary Bolduc had a good year, 12 goals, 18 assists. I guess you probably want a little bit more production out of there. And then Alex Newhook, who battled a lengthy injury, only played about half the season, but he came up with some big goals in the playoffs. Had 25 points, 13 goals, 12 assists. and then Jake Evans and Brandon Gallagher, who is now officially not with them no more. Um, is also in there in that top 15. Gonna head down here, look at what they did goaltending wise. Again, Jakob Dobish kind of really took over that starting job. 29 wins, 10 losses. Had a 901 save percentage and a 278 goals against average. Sam Montembeault had 10 wins, 8 losses, 873 save percentage, and a 343 goals against average. And then Jacob Fowler played a couple of games there. He had 9 wins, 6 losses, a 908 save percentage, and a 243 goals against average, and had a shutout, the only shutout that happened last year for them. So a pretty interesting little factoid there. So we're going to go over here, Puckpedia, Puck GM. We're going to look over at this team and see what we got to deal with here. This is a team that still needs to make a couple of moves. So they need to make a couple of big signings. Arber Xhekaj and Zachary Bolduc are still restricted free agents. As you can see, they have $9 million in cap space, almost about $10 million in cap space. And this is the name of the roster that we upload here on Puckpedia all the time. Montreal Canadiens 2026-2027 season preview, AAH for all around hockey. Go down here, see the draft capital they have to deal with, and they have everything besides this third round pick, which is now with the Vegas Golden Knights. So, really good that they've kept all those draft picks. They've really drafted and developed most of their players instead of bringing in a lot of big names. And then they just kind of bring in those guys like a Philip Deneau later on to kind of solidify the team for the long run. Josh Anderson's there, and Oliver Kapanen's still there. He developed there, and so this is a team that's in the rumors for some big trades here. Obviously, some big names that they're looking at as a number 2 center. One name that's been linked to them a lot lately has been Morgan Frost. I think that could possibly be something that could be done. Shane Wright's on the probably on the move out of Seattle. Maybe that's an interesting thing. I think they would love to get a Dylan Larkin if they could, but Dylan Larkin is yet to include him on their no trade list. And I think honestly, the Red Wings maybe hope that they put Montreal in not that they want to trade in division, but also at the same time, I think they would really like to bring in a Michael Hage as a possibility to bring in a Dylan Larkin. But Montreal was also very reluctant to trade Michael Hage, and even for like a Robert Thomas trade too. So that might not even be a possibility too. So you kind of look at this team. They got some pretty decent prospects coming up: Bryce Pickford, David Reinbach, a couple of really good defensive prospects that they got coming up. Like I said, Michael Hage is somebody who they haven't had signed yet, but he's somebody to look out for. And they've had some pretty decent draft picks the last couple of years. They got Gleb Puchikov there to bring in there from the draft this year. So definitely some decent, good prospects. They've drafted and developed really well and made a pretty solid team all in all. So we kind of look at the team, and the one thing that they do need is a second line center. I think Jake Evans is an excellent player, excellent two-way centerman, but also somebody who maybe is probably better suited for maybe that third line role. And you would probably like to have a Phil Deneau down there at the fourth line role. Like I said, they're linked to possibly a Kirill Marchenko trade. They're linked to a Morgan Frost trade. So we'll look at those type of moves and see what we could possibly get. We'll start off here looking at the Calgary Flames and what could possibly be done here. Now, one name that has definitely been linked to the Calgary Flames and a possible trade has been Arber Xhekaj, which the rumors kind of keep heating up more and more that his times in Montreal could be over with. He still has yet to sign his restricted free agency contract. Calgary and Philadelphia are two teams that are really headed hard after him. I think if you're looking maybe at like a Philadelphia for a Xhekaj type of trade, maybe they could convince him to trade Rasmus Ristolainen into them. But I think that would require Montreal giving up a little bit more pieces that they probably don't want to give up for Rasmus Ristolainen. I think they would rather get something else in return there. So all in all, I think maybe you could have Xhekaj, and if you're gonna put Arber Xhekaj, I think you probably got to put Florian Xhekaj in there too, just to trade the brothers along with each other, because that would probably maybe create a little bit of tension between the Xhekaj family there with Montreal if they traded Arber, if there isn't already tension already. And so that could maybe be the basis of a trade in which they could bring in a Morgan Frost. We can check out Morgan Frost's numbers. Obviously, he has a little bit of a trade protection as well. So, but he had 22 goals, 21 assists for 43 points last season. I think in our Calgary Flames video, we already made a trade in which we traded Morgan Frost to to Montreal, but a lot of some of the Calgary Flames people were not that excited about that type of a deal. But I definitely think Jack Eye could be something that could interest them. However, I don't think Jack Eye has the biggest trade value that everyone thinks he got. Because he's just a really aggressive, solid, bottoms, probably like a 5'6" defenseman at the end of the day. But I do think somebody that could be very interesting to Montreal that they would really want, probably also in this trade. And I've heard his name a lot in the rumor mill has been Zach Whitecloud, and I think he's perfect for a team like Montreal. Definitely somebody they'd be interested in bringing in. So all in all, that's the start of the package. There is Morgan Frost and Zach Whitecloud coming to Montreal for the Jack Eye brothers, but obviously Montreal would have to give up a lot more in this trade. I definitely think if they're trading a Whitecloud, Calgary is the team that's in the rebuild stage. I definitely think they would want to get something big back in return. So maybe they would have to include maybe a David Reinbach in this trade. And if they're taking David Reinbach, who's one of the Montreal's top prospects in this trade, you got to tell them you got to also take Kirby Dach off my hands to get that contract off at 3.6. He didn't play that much for them last season. And, I think Kirby Dach could be an interesting investment for them. And then kind of look over here, and maybe they could have Calgary include a third-round pick or even a fourth-round pick. Be close to a third-round pick then at that point in this trade, since they're also giving up Brian Bach. So we'll include the third-round pick for next year's draft in there. And I think this could possibly be something that could happen. Maybe I'm crazy. Some people like to tell me I'm crazy when I make these trades, but I definitely think maybe this is something that could happen. Maybe even Montreal has to throw in a pick themselves to maybe make it happen as well. But, they're also giving up one of their top prospects in David Reinbach for a guy who scored 40 points in Zach Whitecloud. So I don't think it's necessarily the biggest trade value dip there for them. So I definitely think this might be something that could be interesting. I think Arbor Jack I would definitely sign with Calgary. David Reinbach could definitely come in and be right there and solidify that solid trio then of solid right-handed shooting defenseman with Nemec and Zane Prek there in Calgary. I think something they'd be interested in. And Zach Whitecloud, I think, fits perfectly in this Montreal team. And Morgan Frost, somebody who's got one more year left on his contract. So that's another thing, too. I think that's another reason why Calgary has to throw in a pick there, is because they are taking on the last bit of Frost's contract. But, maybe they could find a way to get Morgan Frost to sign long-term there. So that could possibly be a trade there. David Reinbach's been somebody that's been in the rumor mills of lately, but definitely hasn't equated to a trade yet. So that could possibly be something happens. Another person that's really linked to a big trade with Montreal is with the Columbus Blue Jackets and Kirill Marchenko. I think if you brought in Kirill, this is somebody who you could sign to a long-term contract because you've got a lot of lots to go off of there. I definitely think you probably have to trade some people that might hurt in this type of a trade here. Maybe like an Oliver Kapanen starts it off in that type of a deal. I think you would try your best not to trade Michael Hage, obviously, because I don't think you want to do that in a Kirill Marchenko trade. But you do have draft capital. So maybe you trade a couple of first-round picks along with Oliver Kapanen, or maybe even a second-round pick here, and then you include another good prospect in here. You could bring in there. Maybe even you could include Zachary Bolduc, somebody who hasn't signed his contract with them yet. That could be something that interests Columbus because they're looking for right now ready players. And I think Oliver Kapanen can definitely come in and fit in a pretty solid role for them. Maybe you could even include Bolduc. Have Bolduc's rights, Oliver Kapanen, and a first and a second to go over there to get this trade done, and you bring in Kirill Marchenko. You guys have to let me know if you like those trades or not. Those might be some crazy trades that most people probably wouldn't do. But I'm just speaking out of my mind here for these trades. So then I think you got Morgan Frost there on your first unit. You can move a new hook down here to the third unit. Have Deneau, Evans, Texier there. And that does create a hole in which you would have one more spot to be filled up for your team there. I think you could definitely fit. You could have Gooley and Hudson there in the second unit with Matheson and Dobson in the first unit. With James Strobel, Zach Whitecloud's a pretty solid unit there. And then you have an opening here on the fourth line, left wing spot. I do think there's an interesting free agent that people might like here for a possible signing. Um, and that's a Gustav Nyquist. Obviously, you can see he didn't have a very solid year for them. It might even just end up being another Patrick Laine type replacement, but he's a little bit older, but you could bring him in maybe at 1.5. I don't think it hurts to bring him in. You still have your pretty decent prospects coming up. Michael Hage, I definitely think is somebody who is probably going to end up signing with them after the year at Michigan. I think they're even trying still really hard to sign him now. Owen Beck's another possible prospect who they could call up to play and play those fourth line minutes and maybe split them up there a little bit with Gustav if they wanted to do that. So maybe they could have call up Beck here to play the fourth line and maybe have like a Brett Berard go down to the minors since he played most of his last year in the minors. And then you can maybe run it with this and have Gustav there as a depth forward piece that could bring in a pretty good scoring touch for if there's any major injuries or anything like that to happen. And then I definitely think you're going to try to get Kirill Marchenko locked up long term. I obviously come I think it's September 15th ish time or something like that, and you're not going to be able to offer 8-year contracts. So I definitely think they'll probably maybe try to get him at like a 6-year deal. They brought in a lot of their guys for less. Kent Hughes really has that magic touch with him, but maybe like a 6x11 contract extension for Kirill Marchenko might be good. You can come with Caulfield, Suzuki, Slafkovsky, Marchenko, Frost, and Demidov is a pretty solid unit. Newhook, Evans, Josh Anderson, Owen Beck, Philip Deneau, and Alexander Texier. And then you have like maybe Gustav Nyquist as a depth forward. And then Carrier could swap in and out there too as well. Maybe they could find a way to move Sam Montembeau if they wanted to do that. But all in all, I think these are pretty interesting moves. You have to let me know if I'm a little crazy or not for this one. I definitely think Oliver Kapanen would be somebody that interests Columbus. Those are two really solid guys that can bring in. Bolduc's pretty solid production and was one of the bigger prospects later on. So maybe they could use those guys who they haven't signed. And there's been rumors that they might be moving on from those guys now because they haven't signed them so long at this point. So they can definitely move on from that. Morgan Frost is a UFA at the end of this year. So definitely that could end up being something in which, they kept Michael Hage. So then Hage could end up being that second line center for them next season. I definitely think towards the end of the year, you're probably looking at Hage signing his entry-level contract and maybe even towards the end of the season. Come playoff time, he's probably in that starting lineup, and then you're probably moving in and out there with guys like Owen Beck and Philip Deneau. So definitely, I think this is an interesting team. This is going to be a fun team to watch this upcoming season. They definitely have a lot of big names. They're definitely a team that's going to probably make a run for it. They got all their guys locked up long term. They just signed Demidov to that great contract. They got Slafkovsky locked up. They got Caulfield locked up. They got Suzuki. They have their core guys locked up. Noah Dobson, they brought in. He kind of fits into that core now. Lane Hudson's signed to his big contract. Caden Gooley, Michael Matheson, and I'm sure Michael Hage is going to be signed to a big long-term contract eventually too, because that's just what they do. And he was very good at getting his guys drafted, developed, and letting them see what they can do. Definitely see what the Jacob Fowler can do. They signed Jakob Dobich to his contract. That's going to be a very interesting tandem. I think this team in Montreal is very dangerous going into this upcoming season. They definitely clicked. Martin St. Louis got them clicking on all cylinders. So this is definitely a fun team that's going to be very dangerous. And also a team that I wouldn't be surprised if they won the Atlantic Division this year. A lot of teams got Florida winning it. A lot of teams got Tampa winning it. A lot of people got Buffalo trying to repeat, but Buffalo might be taking that step back and Montreal might be taking that step up. So I definitely think Montreal is a very dangerous team. Maybe look for them to make even a deep run in the playoffs. Could they win a Stanley Cup? I don't know, but they definitely have a core that's definitely developing into something special. So I hope you guys really like this video. Leave a like, comment, and share, and subscribe to All Around Hockey, the YouTube channel for the All Around Hockey fan. I've really enjoyed making these videos. We're at the halfway point next episode when we go over the Nashville Predators. So I'll talk to you guys in that episode. All right. Have a great day.